Welcome to the Great Beer State podcast from the Michigan Brewers Guild. The Great Beer State is a weekly show sharing conversations and stories from the passionate people who contribute to our vibrant Michigan beer community. It is made up of a mix between full-length archived interviews from the Guild's first documentary book project, A Rising Tide, Stories from the Michigan Brewers Guild, and conversations recorded in the here and now. Each episode is kicked off with a conversational update from host Scott Graham, Executive Director of the Guild, and the Brewangelist Fred Biltman, author of A Rising Tide. Here's Scott and Fred. Welcome to episode 2, Scott. Here we are with the Great Beer State podcast. Great to see you again.
Yes, likewise. It's nice to be here in the hop yard, as it were.
Yeah, we've got our Zoom backgrounds going on. We are persevering and surrounding ourselves with hops and support your local Michigan brewery regalia as we should. So this episode will be a little different in that we're featuring the first interview. So our introduction here will be a little shorter, but it's exciting to have launched episode 1. And that's making its way through the airwaves now and getting registered with all the podcast servers and everything. So I guess before we go into kind of guild updates, do you have any thoughts or reflections on getting this thing out into the world with episode 1?
Other than just really looking forward to hopefully some people listening and giving us some feedback, I'd like to have some of the enthusiasm that we feel come back at us. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah,
me too. I mean, as we're recording this, it's been sort of on the web servers for about 24 hours. So at this point, it's too soon to have any feedback. But I am really happy with the work that the Guild team has done in putting together some of the creative pieces of it, and it is pretty just exciting to see it head out into the world to greet all the people. So with that said, why don't we jump into Guild updates? We thought we'd organize this and talk about what brewery members should be hearing about, what the enthusiast members should know about, and then what our Michigan beer-loving public should hear. So for brewery members, what's new? What's going on?
Well, when you bring that up, it makes me think of the COVID-19 virus world that we're all living through right now and hoping to kind of emerge from, and that's starting. I guess we've just last week, 2 of the identified regions of the state, that being the UP and a lot of area of the northern lower peninsula, were allowed to reopen restaurants, bars, drinking establishments, which included breweries. And not everybody was ready to open right away. I think it was kind of a quick notice, but quite a few places opened. And I think many folks were relieved to be able to go out and get a beer and socialize, albeit at kind of a limited capacity and keeping some responsible social distancing. But it's noteworthy that things are starting to open up, and I hope we can see more of that, because I know many folks are pretty nervous about being able to get started and get some cash coming back in their operation.
Yeah, and all the protocols involved, like, it's just such a mix of emotions to think about the excitement of finally being able to get back to what your whole business is about, and then having to do it with a whole new set of rules and protocols and concerns, and that has its own challenge to it. So that mix of eagerness and excitement with how do we do this, I imagine, is it's just a tightrope to walk.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that breweries have going for them. You know, anybody that operates a kitchen is pretty familiar with sanitation, cleanliness, and procedures. So making those adaptions is not a huge hurdle. And breweries are certainly aware of microbes and contamination, and are probably in a good mindset to be able to think about how to safely sanitize and keep people safe and distanced. So maybe we've got a little advantage there.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess for everybody else in the other regions, it's still wait and see as far as we know. And, as this goes out, that it changes by the day. So this probably isn't the place to get your information operationally. But any thoughts on the best places for brewery members to be getting the best, timeliest information for what's next?
Yeah, certainly state websites, including the michigan.gov/coronavirus and the Michigan Liquor Control homepage, has a frequently asked questions. But the Brewers Guild has a coronavirus info page that is populated with lots of different information that has come, whether it's the Centers for Disease Control, the state Liquor Control Commission, other resources we point to from the Brewers Association, even our Restaurant and Lodging Association has some great information. And so we've tried to consolidate all that in one place on our coronavirus webpage at mibeer.com.
Great. So how about enthusiast members? We have, there's a growing, strong voiced group of enthusiast members in the guild. Do you have any new things for them to pay attention to or be aware of? What's the message for enthusiasts?
Interestingly enough, I think that this COVID-19 business is causing some challenges. Our enthusiast members, one of the best things that they get with their membership, or one that's most looked forward to, I think, is their ability to have access to breweries and beers early at our beer festivals, that VIP enthusiast hour we have before general admission to the festivals. And with no festivals, well, I shouldn't say no, but with the spring festival being canceled, and now we just recently announced that we wouldn't have the summer festival either. It reduces some of those opportunities for them to get the benefit of their membership. So we actually extended all of our enthusiast memberships by 6 months as a token of our appreciation for their support, and hope that they will continue their support and find value. But in looking at other ways that we could do things that were fun and of value for the enthusiast members, we've created kind of a behind the scenes segment of our podcast recordings where we can share an inside look and a little bit of interaction with the enthusiast membership.
Yeah. And so we're still working out the technical details of that, but the idea is that we're inviting enthusiasts to an exclusive viewing of this weekly taping where you and I can introduce the interview subject or the character, the person that we're talking to, whether that's an archived interview or one recorded in the here and now. We'll give these updates. We'll talk about whatever comes up. And so we're going to be inviting enthusiasts to have a virtual experience that's happening live. And then when we wrap the recording, we'll open up sort of a Q&A conversation that's less formal and not recorded for broadcast. So I'm interested to see how that's going to work. We're still threading the needle a little bit on how and where to live stream it, and how to, looking at our options there for the best accessibility for them and sort of ease of function for us and quality of recording. But I'm excited. I think it should be a lot of fun. I hope people are able to join us. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. And then for the and I would say that we're going to have that up and running within the month of June. We're going to do a couple of test flights and make sure we have our technology figured out before we have people scheduling an hour in their lives to watch us fumble with technology. We're going to avoid that and make sure we got it working and announce probably a week or two in advance. So stay tuned for that. How about the public? You mentioned the spring and summer beer festival are canceled already. Anything they need to know? If were there advanced tickets sold anywhere? Anything people need to know about either of those festivals or about looking ahead towards fall?
I think aside from the announcement, there's not much that we need to know. We actually held off on releasing ticket sales for the Summer Beer Festival because we were unsure. So there was nothing complicating that. And while we did have some sales going for the Spring Festival that was scheduled for the middle of May, those are all refunded, and I think the questions are all answered. So we have not made any announcements about the two fall festivals, the UP Fall Festival and the Detroit Fall Festival. It's really hard to know what things will look like then. I think it's easy to speculate that it'll be difficult to do those events, at least like we're used to doing them traditionally, but we just, there's so many unknowns that we're still in a wait and see mode with no announcement about cancellations of those at this time. And I guess as a general pitch, I would like to reinforce the message that that business at our breweries, anybody that loves their local brewery, and whether it's food or beer to go, they are open. Not all of them. I guess you have to check with each one and see. But if they are, they sure appreciate you stopping by. And whether it's a gift card or beer to go or food to go or all of the above, it means a lot right now.
Yes, definitely. Support your local brewery. Speaking of which, our next short segment is called The Brewer's Dozen. So with with more than 270 brewery members, and in the arc of how breweries have opened in the last decade, it'd be very easy to have a brewery open near you and you don't necessarily know about it or haven't checked their beer out yet. So one thing we thought we'd do is over the course of these episodes work through the whole member roll, 13 at a time, the Brewer's Dozen. So Scott, you want to kick us off with a brewery you want to give a shout out to today?
Yeah, let's go to the far or quite far out in the western upper peninsula of Michigan to 51st State Brewing Company in Kingsford, Michigan.
Right on. I'm up next, and I got an old timer, Royal Oak Brewery in Royal Oak, Michigan. Longtime guild supporter. Put forward several board members between Drew and Pat. So big shout out to Royal Oak Brewery in Royal Oak, Michigan.
Yeah, and let's talk a little tiny bit about Latitude 42 Brewing Company. Latitude 42 is in Portage. They got quite a spectacular brewery there, and they opened a second location in Ashtimo, which is just west of Kalamazoo.
Right on. So coming to you from DeWitt, Michigan, we've got Looking Glass Brewing Company. And DeWitt's just outside of Lansing. I think one of the favorite things for me being in this as long as I have and as long as you have is seeing some of these small towns have breweries in them. I just think, Lansing is one thing, DeWitt's another. To see them having a brewery is just, I don't know, it's awesome to me. So way to go, Looking Glass.
Yeah.
Check them out. Who do you got next?
And a brewery that's near and dear to my heart is Big Buck Brewery in Gaylord. Having been involved in that project and getting it going from the start, happy to see them back up and operating as part of one of the regions that could reopen.
Yeah, it's exciting times. All right. Well, related to today's guest, Jack Archiable, who we'll talk about shortly, he's got connections to and just retired from Shorts Brewing Company, who has their pub in Bel Air and production brewery in Elk Rapids. All sorts of exciting stuff going up there. I don't know about their status, whether they have opened the pub or not, but I'm sure they will be soon.
Yeah, I believe so. And let's move to Southwest Michigan. Thornapple Brewing Company in Grand Rapids. Fun place to go and drink and dine. Grand Rapids certainly has, is one of the centers, and Thornapple's a good one to have on the list.
Absolutely. So going up to the Sioux, the upper right, uh, I guess it's the end of your pointer finger on your left hand if you're doing the two peninsula hand movement. We've got Sioux Brewing Company in Sault Ste. Marie, a remarkable place indeed. Who's next for you?
In Southeast Michigan, I would like to mention Brooks Brewing Company with their operation in Shelby Township, and they expanded out of there to, some people like to say Ferned Ale. Get it?
Ah, yes. So a brewery in a community that I'm sure could use all the shout outs they can get is Midland Brewing Company in Midland, Michigan. So on top of all this pandemic, this, once in a lifetime pandemic, they have the dam bursting and causing incredible flooding in that community. So support and shout outs go to Midland Brewing Company in that whole area. I don't know if you have any up to the minute updates there. I'm not aware of the specifics with them.
I I don't know the status. I think the brewery was okay, but I haven't talked to those folks. And looking at different photos in the news reports and listening to the damage and devastation, it was really horrific. So I really feel for everybody there and hope the brewery's doing well.
Yeah, likewise. They're going to need support, like everybody else, but
yep.
Worse.
Next up is Bob's Brewery in Grand Rapids. So the brewery's been around for quite some time. Of course, John Svoboda, who's the brewer there, has been involved with the guild for a long time. Great supporter, and it's quite a unique location. The Bob, the big old building, is a multi-concept establishment. That's a fun place and one of our longtime members.
Yeah, it was one of those first anchors in the we're going to revitalize downtown movement of just about of any downtowns I can remember. It was a bold move forward. My next brewery is Waldorf Brew Pub in Hastings, Michigan. Another great small town story I think has, brought a certain beer, brewing, craft, food, and drink pulse forward in a small town in an interesting area.
Yeah, it's really, really great that, as you mentioned before, small towns can sustain and support a brew pub like Waldorf. It really is a nice place and quite a small town. That brings us to number 13 in our Brewer's Dozen, which is Rare Bird Brew Pub in Traverse City. Another area that's really got a great local brewing culture going on, the Traverse City area, and Rare Bird is certainly a great place to get a beer, a bite to eat. They have a thoughtful selection of guest beers at their brew pub as well. So Rare Bird is always on my list when we're thinking of places to go in the Traverse City area.
Oh yeah, it's a really cool spot. All right, well that's the Brewer's Dozen, which brings us to the last section, which is really what we're here for today, which is to kick off and introduce Jack Archiable. This is an interview that was recorded inside the UP Fall Beer Festival of 2018 while we were collecting information, stories, I should say. We're collecting stories for A Rising Tide, the book about the formation and existence of the Brewers Guild. So I've known Jack for a long time. You've known Jack for a long time. I love this interview because I felt like I got to know. I felt like I got to hear stories that I didn't know about. I learned more about Jack than I ever had before, and I was amazed. I was fascinated. And the reason he's first, the reason he gets an early mention, he's on the front part of the book, is that I started to realize how homebrewing history had such deep impact on the beginning of the brewing industry in Michigan deeper than you might see at the surface level, because, you know, with real ale happening in, mid 80s, along with Kalamazoo Brewing Company, you got that sort of picture. But Jack sharing story about home brewing in Ohio in 73 just blew my mind. I don't know if you were familiar with that before.
No, there were many things I didn't know about Jack, and I've known Jack since they got the operation going at Traverse Brewing Company, and it was really fun to hear some of the backstory, some things that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And aside from the sad fact that Traverse Brewing Company isn't around today, it was a fun place. I enjoyed some good beers there, and aside from all of that, I just really think Jack is a hell of a great guy.
Yeah, he is. And you could hear his appreciation for the culture of brewing, the culture of beer, the culture of Michigan beer, through all his through all of his paths and challenges. He just seems to light up when he starts talking about the community, which is very encouraging, and just spreads a lot of good energy. And I don't, I suppose we'll have to find
agreed.
we'll have to find the right balance on introducing these interviews, because I don't want to be responsible for spoilers. But Jack talking about how they were mixing Guinness and Rolling Rock to make dark beer in the early 70s is just tells a tale in terms of where we've come. And so I also really think that you've got that early stage, but I think that how his relationship grew with Joe Short, and both in terms of just supporting one another, both working at both breweries over the course of time. And I'll let him tell the story for the listeners, but I think that again, knowing all the players and having been involved with the guild, there was still a layer of collaboration and camaraderie and support there that I didn't know was happening at the time. And I was just, and re-listening to this interview, I could kind of hear myself going, holy cow, this is something else. So yeah, it's heartwarming, really. So you were saying,
agreed, and we can all be thankful that we don't have to mix a dark beer and a light beer today to get something tasty or interesting or different.
That's right. In a lager from Pennsylvania with a stout originally from Ireland at that time, who knows?
Yeah.
So we were just saying before this call that they just had a retirement party for Jack. So he is now he was at Shorts for a while here and was there at the time. You'll hear it from him. He was at Shorts at the time of this interview, and he's recently retired. So kudos, Jack. Happy retirement. Hope you're listening, and thanks for everything you've given to our community and beer drinkers everywhere. So Scott, you have anything to add?
Well said. Yeah, of course No, I think you did a great job. I just think really highly of Jack. Really enjoyed re-listening to the interview myself, and wish him all the best.
Right on. Cheers, Jack. Thanks for everything. For everybody else listening, thanks for supporting the Michigan Brewers Guild and the Great Beer State podcast. Here's Jack. So, we're just talking about history and telling stories. I'd love to kind of start with how you started brewing in Michigan and what gave you the idea.
Basically, as a child growing up, mom's side of the family was French-German. Her grandfather, my great-grandfather, was a Braumeister in Hamburg, Germany. So he came over to America and started working at Trommel's Beer Gardens in Brooklyn. And so when we'd have Sunday dinners, all the family there, parents, grandparents, my sister, and myself, Mom would start this friendly banter with my father, Dad's side of the family, Scot-Irish, like, well, Arch, my family made much better beer than your family. And Dad would say, you're right, Maggie. They did, but our family made much better Scotch and Irish whiskey than your family. And they'd just wink at each other. So my nickname as a child was the Beer Baron because at the age of 10, I was sipping on beer. My parents would let me do that. Dad traveled a lot throughout Europe, so it was more of a continental upbringing. By the time I was 15 and 16, I was buying my own beer. And we had 3 great breweries in Cincinnati at that point in time. One was actually across the river in Newport. So the fresh beer was always, always really good. I got to Ohio University, and of course, it's university time. I'm studying, I'm protesting against the war, I'm trying to drink good beer, and the closest brewery we had was Rolling Rock. It's down in Athens, Ohio University. Yeah. So I took a bartending class, so I had a bartending license, and at that point in time in our student union, we served beer and wine to the teachers and to the students. So I got a job there, and the first thing I did was, for something completely different, I would take a bottle of Guinness, pour it into a pitcher of beer, and fill it up the rest of the way with Rolling Rock. And people loved it. It just went like... So,
better beer by blending.
Yes, and so we'd do that when my friends and I, when we'd go to the Union Bar or whatever bar we were going to uptown, and we were doing that on a Saturday night. And in these bars at this time, it was wild because one night the Grateful Dead would walk in, another night somebody else would walk in. They weren't playing in Athens, they were passing through. And we were drinking the mixed beers, and we walked out, paid up, walked out, and this gentleman walks up behind us and goes, "Do you young guys want to try some real beer?" And I didn't know what he meant by real beer. I was like, "What do you mean real beer?" He goes, "Follow me." So we walked down to his house, and in his basement, he has about at least 10, if not a dozen, 5-gallon primary fermenters bubbling away.
Yeah.
It's got it in
What
all
year
different
is this,
stages. This would have been 73.
Wow.
And so I drank one of them, and the hops kicked in because I wasn't used to hops. And I'm like, "Wow, this is really good." He goes, "You want another one?" And we're walking. I'm like, "Yeah." So we run into him again the next night, and finally I'm like, "Hey," when his nickname was Thor, I can't remember his real name, but he had long hair and he looked like a Norwegian, so we called him Thor. And I said, "Will you show me how you do this?" So he brought me in basement, and first month, 3 weeks at least, all I did was wash bottles and watch him. Then he showed me how to mash in using whole grains, and he also showed me how to do a canned, syrup. At that point in time, as soon as I got out of school, I started doing that every place I went. I was homebrewing like crazy until people in Elk Rapids started saying, "You need to start your own brewery, you need to start your own brewery." And I'm like, "I don't want to do that, that's way too much trouble. I just like doing the homebrew." Finally, it was like I got goaded into it, and I got a couple credit cards and started TBC. People got interested. Every bank laughed at us in this time period. You couldn't get a bank loan to save your life. What do you want, to make beer? We got Budweiser, we got Miller, we got Labatt's. Why do you want to make beer? So finally we got a bank to give us a loan if we at first went out for at least a year and a half, brewed beer, and they would watch to see if it was successful or not. So we found Alan Pugsley out on the East Coast, at that point in time in Cambridge, Maryland. We went out and brewed with him.
Remind me of the year?
This would have been the early 90s.
Okay.
Probably 92.
Okay.
And
so right before the law change?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And so Alan Pugsley, brought us through. We paid him $2,000, but he promised if we bought equipment from him, he would put that $2,000 towards the equipment as a down payment, which he did. So we're still trying to find a building. First building was so polluted, we had to leave it alone. We're bringing beer now. Actually, we're brewing the beer in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania at Fran Mead's Brewery, Red Feather, doesn't exist anymore. And then we'd either bootleg it back to Michigan or we'd legally drive it back to Michigan. After a year and a half, the sales were pretty good. We had good reviews, and the bank said, "Okay, we'll lend you some money." So I borrowed $250,000.
So you existed as a company in Michigan, but you needed to kind of contract brew yourselves.
Yes.
In Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Because you didn't have the backing to have that equipment at your brewery.
You are correct.
You did that under a brewer's license because that's the only way you would have been able to sell it, right?
We did that under a beverage license.
Under a beverage license.
Beverage Company at that point in time.
Oh.
And the day we brewed our first batch of real Manitou was June 7th maybe. It was the same day as O.J. Simpson taking his white Bronco ride. Because we got done with the brew, they turned on the TV set and I go, why is O.J. driving so slow? So whatever year that was, I think it was 94?
Yeah, I think so, because I was selling Warsteiner, because I remember I wasn't at Bell's yet, which was 95, because I remember that day, because we stopped selling beer and sat in a bar and watched this fucking
What's
show.
he doing?
What the hell's going on?
He's been followed by all these police. Why isn't he pulling over?
Yeah, so I think it was 94.
Yeah, and so we got our okay from, at that point in time, the BATF for our label approval, and then they rescinded it. They gave us a verbal okay, we went out there to bottle the beer, and they rescinded it because they thought that Manitou, the word Manitou, was an island or a territory, and if you have an island or a territory, according to the BATF at that time, you had to include the word brand or style. So it became Manitou brand. That took another month and a half to get those labels ready. So our first batch of Manitou did not taste like an ale, and when we emptied the conditioning tanks, the bottling tanks, got everything bottled, Chris and I crawled into the tank, vented it and crawled into it, and it was like Oreo cookies all over the bottom from the barley falling out of suspension for being in the tank so long.
Wow.
But it was drinkable, people did like it. The second batch we did, we had the label approval and everything, and people really liked the second batch. So it just kept on rolling that way until we could get Traverse Brewing Company up and running in Elk Rapids, which would have been January, our first brew there would have been January 2nd, 1996.
Okay. And so you kind of brought your brewing ethos from the college years and from Ohio. What brought you to Michigan, and what did you see? Was there anything about Michigan that contributed to your idea, or was it mostly an idea that was going to happen and you ended up in Michigan?
It was mostly, I came to Michigan because I was tired of the thermal inversions they have on the Ohio River, where it becomes as polluted in those days as LA on a bad day, Los Angeles, California with the smog, and the heat and the humidity. And I had the family, the last time we had a family vacation all together, my sister, myself, and my parents would have been like in 1962, and we came up to Acme and stayed in some little cool cabins that were, nowadays it's Grand Traverse condominiums are there. And we spent 2 weeks up here. So I had a job offering in a town down in the Thumb area, pulled into that town and went, I can't live here. And I said, I don't even want to do an interview with you. I'm sorry, I don't want to waste your time. And we just drove, my wife and I at the time just drove up to Traverse City. I walked into a real estate place and said, I'd like to see some property. And they said, well, how much money do you have? And I said, $15,000. They said, keep going to Elk Rapids. And I found a cabin for $14,000 in Elk Rapids. Still own it, and I rent it out now. So that was moving up here, which was 77. And if you remember the winter of 77, Traverse City and Elk Rapids had more snow than anybody else in the state of Michigan.
Wow.
In that one storm. It was a 3-day storm. Wow. I'm like, I moved into this? What was I thinking?
What have I done?
What have I done? And at that point in time, I was also doing amateur photography as well as home brewing. So we had our home brew, and I would develop the film, create the pictures, just old style, single lens reflex. But once again, it was my friends and everyone who came over to the cabin who said, this was really good stuff.
So you're home brewing close to 20 years, 15 years prior to the brewery in Michigan.
Yes.
Was there, well, tell me about the home brewing community. Were there other people brewing? Were you teaching people to brew the way Thor taught you?
Yes.
What were those years like?
In my cabin, I didn't do too many full all grain mashes. I was using more of the syrup most of the time. 10% I'd go for the all grain, but I was showing people how to do it. I was using my bathtub to sterilize the bottles and also to develop the film. And people just, it was one of those things where the thing that made me think I could do this was seeing on the cover of Zy Mergy magazine, the little Milwaukee brewery, Lakefront.
Yeah.
And once I saw that and read that article, and they said they had started their company up for X amount of dollars, I thought, well, I could probably raise that much money. And that then took another 4 years to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we did go to Lakefront too to brew, which was a lot of fun.
That's cool.
Yeah. So I had a chance to brew in about at least 8, 9 different breweries.
What were those conversations like when you were reaching out to Brew in order to supply your
knowledge?
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me what was that like when you reached out and said, I want to brew at your place?
I called them up. I don't know if I talked to Rich or Kip, or somebody else. But I said, yeah, I'd like to come over and work for free and make some beer. And after they got done laughing, I'm like, no, I'm serious. I'll come and work for free. Because I was trying to take the 5-gallon batch into a 7-barrel or whatever they had. I think they had a 9 or a 10-barrel at that point in time at Lakefront. And they were only bottling 1 bottle at a time at that point in time. And the Heens hadn't even come out yet.
Yeah, wow.
So, but it was a fun experience. We stayed there for a week, and we went to the local sports bars and stuff, and we thought, oh, what a great town this is. What is the melting pot, the whole idea of America is working here. Little did we realize we were in Jeffrey Dahmer's neighborhood.
Some things work, some things don't.
Yes.
How many breweries overall did you? So you were kind of doing your own stage or internship, your own sort of curriculum of finding. And at that time, it had to be a trick to find breweries that
would let you do that.
How did you choose what breweries, and how many overall did you go to?
Pretty much through reading Zymurgy magazine, and at least a half a dozen. I brewed up in Carleton Place, Canada, at Hart Brewing Company, which no longer exists, unfortunately, which is beautiful. It's on the Canadian Mississippi River, Carleton Place. Great ride going up to the Sault Ste. Marie and going down and around that way. Brewed at Fran Meads, of course, where we were brewing the Manitou originally at Arrowhead, or Red Feather rather. Brewed at the Wild Goose, which was the one that Pugsley put together in Cambridge, Maryland on the Choptank River.
Yeah, I remember that.
Brewed for a small amount of time at the old, they'd let me walk into the Shaneling building and I would watch them back when I was young, but I didn't get any hands-on experience then. So it was mostly those right there. And Pugsley was great. I'd always tease him by telling him that he looked like a cross between Paul McCartney and Tweety Bird, because he was really tall. And he tried to get you upset at times, and we drank like crazy. That man can outdrink most men. So I'd be going to bed at 4 o'clock in the morning and getting up at 5:30 to go make a batch of beer. And Alan would always go, "Are you doing all right? Are you feeling okay?" I'm like, "Yeah." Well, anytime I get under your skin or anything, you can tell me to piss off if you'd like. I go, "Alan, I wouldn't say that to you. I tell you to fucking piss off." So, but I mean, yeah, that's how basically it came about. And we ran it from 96 to 2008. A couple of different partners changed hands, and then I got shut down by the LCC for supposedly not paying my taxes. It was January 8th, 2008. And I walked into the front door and there was yellow tape and a sign on there. And I'm like, what the heck? Because I had sent the mail, or the money in, the checks in. So my hearing was around St. Patrick's Day of that same year in Gaylord. So I go to the hearing and I said, excuse me, I have the canceled checks right here. How much money do I actually owe you? And the guy looks it up, he goes, you owe us $85 and change. I'm going, so you shut me down for $85 and change?
Holy shit.
I said, okay, well, let me cut you a check right now. Oh, no, we're not bonded. We can't take that money. You have to send it in to Lansing. I said, well, how long is it going to take me to get my license back? He said, you're going to have to resubmit it. It'll probably be the middle to end of July. And as we all know, in that time period, you needed those summer months, especially up there.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I had smoke coming out of my ears. I said, okay, thank you very much. I was polite because I've been raised to be polite. I drove straight to Bel Air to talk to Joe Short, and he was on a frustration run too. He was ready to throw the towel in, and he was driving out to introduced himself to Sam at Dogfish Head. He took a bunch of his bottled beer. He met Sam. Sam said, your beer's really good. You need a production facility. So that's when they bought the building in Elk Rapids that y'all were at. And Joe called me up late January, early February of 2009 and said, Arch, I need your help. So I came in and I said, what's up? He goes, I got this bottling machine. We got to figure out how to get this to work and label bottles. And I'm like, let me see the machine. And so he shows me, and it was an old Mustang, and he shows me the machine. And the machine was like a bottler that would bottle bottles about this size. Let me get it out of my pocket here. There it is. It was for medicinal purposes only. It would bottle something that size.
Yeah.
I said, we can't convert that. He goes, yeah, we can convert it. I said, Joe, put it back, sell it, get rid of it.
Take it from where you got it.
And
take it to where you got it.
He said, well, what are we going to do? I said, I'll be right back. So I went back to my building. They had changed the locks, of course. So I slipped in through a window and I grabbed my old label, which was a Pot Devon from Jersey. We had Elmer's glue on one side and a bunch of gears, so your label would go through, get glue on it, and then you'd stick it on your bottle. And we did that for 4 or 5 months until we could buy a real labeler, at which point Joe asked me to come on. I was working for free because I knew what he was going through and I didn't want to strap him for cash. And after we got the labeler going, he goes, okay, I want you on payroll. I went, okay. You got it, Joe. He said, I want you to go salary. And I just started laughing at him. Man, I love you like a brother, but I'm not doing salary. I'll do hourly. So when I leave here, I'm leaving here, and I don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
He goes, you sure? I'm like, well, you can't have a lot of overtime. It's all good, Joe. It's all good. So that's how.
So the tax man, the lack of resolution, or I wonder how. I don't know what I'm asking other than how did that conclude? So that $85 essentially shut the brewery down.
Yeah. Yeah. I just threw the towel in and let the bank take it over.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
That's unbelievable.
And so
how long from, I think you told me in months, but how long was it from when that shut down to when you're at Shorts?
A year.
A year.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
January of 2008 to February of 2009.
So I want to back up a little bit from that and talk about how you knew Joe and what drew you to go there, because it sounds like you already had a relationship.
Oh yeah, we did.
So now you kind of covered, the beginning in '94 to 08.
Right.
What was your? That's a very busy time in terms of breweries opening in Michigan, in terms of the beer scene changing in Michigan.
Oh yeah.
So what did you see develop, and how is it that you came to have a relationship with Joe?
I was making a batch of my Sleeping Bear Brown, and one of my business partners said, "There's a couple of young men outside with 6 packs of beer. They're in our little tiny pub room at that time, and so they want to talk to you." And I went, "Okay, give me 15, 20 minutes, and I'll hop out of here and get it done." So I went out, and I knew Joe because I remember him when he was about this tall. When I was bartending, his mom would come in with all the children, and it was Joe Short. He introduced himself, popped open a couple of his beers, took sips of it, and went, "These are really good. Why'd you bring them here?" He goes, "I'd like to get a job." I went, "Okay." Without talking to any of my other business partners, I said,
"So these are home brews. This is pre-Short.
This would be early Hooma Loopalicious."
Yeah, gotcha.
And I took another look at him and went, "Wait a minute, Joe, how old are you?" And he said, "I'm 20. I said, "Okay, come back when you're 21, I'll give you a job." He goes, "That'll be in 2 months. I said, "Come back in 2 months, I'll give you a job."
Yeah.
So they were all high-fiving and hooping and hollering, and they split, left the beer there, which was really good. And my business partner looked at me and said, "Well, that was very inconsiderate of you." I'm like, "Why's that?" I said, "We didn't talk about that, and I thought his beers sucked. I thought they were too big." I go, "Well, they're different than ours, but I thought they were pretty good, especially for homebrew." And so Joe and I, when he started working at Traverse Brewing Company, he and I definitely bonded in jokes and laughter. The Soft Parade's named after his time period working at Traverse Brewing Company because we'd listened to The Doors so much.
That's great. That's great. So how long did he work there?
Not long enough, only about 7-8 months.
Yeah.
He didn't like one of the business partners, so he left.
And how long was it before he opened?
He opened
shop?
in April of 2004 in Bel Air.
And so for you, as a guy who inconsiderately risked his reputation by hiring him on the spot. I mean, that's my paraphrase anyways.
Right.
But what was it like watching him open, and did you have some rooting interest there and kind of seeing a young guy also risk his...
Yeah, well,
his,
John Niedermeyer, and he was brewing then. John and Joe brewed together at Traverse Brewing Company. And so John would do something on the pilot system that one of his friends had made, and we would basically keg that up in the Sixers and sell it, and all the proceeds of that would go into Joe's pocket. We just slide in, okay, you got to pay an electrician, you need to pay somebody here. We call it short stays, and we did that 2 or 3 times. John will remember more how many times we did it, but it was
so Joe was gone, starting his own project, and you guys were creating a fundraising portion of your product stream to help him open.
Oh yeah, because I mean, we'd all started the guild already.
Yeah.
We remember when that happened, and so it was like, what you need, man, let me help you. Because Joe, I knew he was definitely a go-getter. He's stubborn in the fact that he doesn't want to go halfway anywhere. He wants to go all the way. He wants to make it the best he possibly can, which is a good stubbornness to have. And he was a lot of fun to just be with. Still is.
Yeah.
Still is. In those days, he would do a Neil Young's falsetto voice of Old Man and sing it to me. That's where I got the nickname Old Man from Joe Short.
That's great. And so you mentioned the guild there, and so the guild started after your brewery in '97. And what do you think that was born out of, and maybe what's your sort of first guild memories?
My first memories of it, the conception of it, was Rex and Mary Halfpenny talking to me up in Elk Rapids. They came to the brewery, and Rex said something to the effect of, in Oregon, they have a brewers guild. Here, you just in Michigan have the wine guild. We should all get together and start a brewers guild. And I was like, I'm into it. And one of my other business partners said, well, that's just stupid. We don't want to do that. And I finally talked him into that it would be a good idea. So as far as I could tell, it was Rex spearheading it. So, and the first meeting we had was down in Saginaw.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hamilton Street Pub.
Yes, exactly.
Which it was even pre-guild, because it was a meeting about the guild.
About the guild. Are we going to do this?
In neutral territory.
Yes. Yes, exactly. And Larry got up and talked, and a bunch of other people.
And maybe Rex wasn't talking about the beverage wine. He might have been referring to the Winers Guild.
Yes.
That's all we were doing.
Yes, exactly. But it was a lot of fun, and I mean, if Joe needed something, or if Petoskey Brewing or whoever needs something, we usually just make sure they get it. Nowadays, if they want a large amount of hops, of course, you're going to have to pay for it. Back in the old days, if you needed a couple 55-pound bags of barley or something, here, just take it. Pay me back when you can.
Yeah.
With the same stuff. So,
what did you take away from that first gathering, though, and how did things progress once the guild existed?
If memory serves me well, John, that's from myself, Mike, and another young man from Mackinac Brewing Company. We all drove down there together, and I was excited about it. I thought this is great because collectively together we can do a lot more than we can single-handedly.
Yeah.
So I was totally into it from the get-go.
Yeah. And do you think that it has helped? Do you think it's fostered a strength that we wouldn't have otherwise? I
think that it definitely helps us a heck of a lot. I think what you all have done here with the festivals and what Scotty Graham and Scott Newman Bale and everybody's doing, I think it's a wonderful thing because somebody's got to go to Lansing and go, hey, we're here.
Yeah.
And we're not going away, and we'd like to have some stuff changed. So I think it's been effective, yes. It's a lot of fun. I mean, the Upper Peninsula on a beautiful day like this for the Fall Beer Festival, it doesn't get any better than this.
How do you beat it?
Yeah, you can't.
And you mentioned, I mean, I feel like clearly it's part of your own personal ethos to reach out and help and support and contribite to a community. That's
that was
what I
passed
feel
on by my grandfathers and my father and mother, yes.
But then you also mentioned the Guild in relation to your story about helping Joe get started.
Oh, yeah.
So how did those converge? Do you feel like, do you feel like the Guild helped develop that ethos in people that, and in a community that might not have otherwise had it the way you were raised? I mean,
I think it definitely does, yes.
Encourage that sort of, hey, we're part of this, let's help each other.
I mean, Joe's first bar was set up by the gentleman, good friend who's now out in California. Did all the inlay and stuff, and Craig Brown would come back and say, hey, Joe's copying you every way. I'm like, no, he's not, he's doing his own thing. He goes, yeah, but it's going to be competition. I'm like, no, it's not competition, Craig, because the more breweries, the more people are going to come in and we're going to sell more beer. So it's not negative, it's very positive.
Yeah. And what has that been like to watch the change, growth of choice, of volume, of whatever, like for the consumer? Michigan has changed over the last 20 years in terms of beer.
Oh, yes.
And you've watched that from before the seed was in the ground.
Right.
So how do you feel it's different? Is it or better, and what do you make of it?
I think it's better in the fact that we have such a variety now. I do remember Rex or Mary asking me back before the Guild started, or right at the very beginning of it, or I asked them, how many breweries do you think will be around in the year 2000? And my answer was, I don't know, 25, 30?
Yeah.
And now we have how many?
380, something like
380?
that. No, it was 320 at the end of last year.
320 at the end of last year. That's great. I mean, being able to go to a town, Traverse City, the brewers and the cellarmen at Shorts and I the other day at lunchtime were going, how many are in Traverse City? We could name 12, but we weren't sure if that was all. There could be more.
Yeah, and what do you think that does for the consumer?
Gives them a nice variety of change and choice, different tastes. I think it's people like interesting, curious things, and the different beers going paired with the different foods. I think it's very exciting right now. I'm the traditionalist, and Joe knows that. I always just did an ale or a red ale or a stout or an IPA or something like that. But working with Joe, it's so much fun to see exactly what they're coming up with. I mean, and sometimes I'll drink and go, I don't know what this is, but it's usually pretty good.
Yeah. What do you think having a brewery does for a local community? Are communities benefiting, or how are communities benefiting from having a collection of a larger number of smaller businesses in more communities?
It's basically giving people a chance to go somewhere, and especially at Shorts and Traverse Brewing Company too, there's just music, there's never any television, so people actually sit down and communicate and talk, so it's more of a social gathering, a la what the old pubs of Europe are like. If you go back and read throughout history, they did want to have prohibition in England, and World War II stopped that from happening because after the bombings in London, people would go to the pubs to say, okay, who's still alive? How can we help? And it became a social fortification of, we can win this war, but we've got a mess to clean up right now. So the prohibition never appeared there because of that fact, because the pub became a traditional place to go and talk and communicate.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different over here, but I think the pub and the breweries are more like that, where people go are having fun and communicating with each other.
Yeah.
And with social media now, they can communicate with anybody on the planet with their cell phones and stuff like that. So it's sweet. It's very cool. I'm happy. I'm happy to be in this period of time. It's very exciting, and at 65 going on 50, I'm loving it.
Yeah.
I really am. I mean, Joe's keeping me employed. I turned 64. I go, do you still want me around? He goes, don't leave. Cool. So for my next time I got an assessment, I said, okay, there's two things I want. I only want to work 4 days a week, and I want a free growler because all the administration people here get a free growler, and I don't. I want a free growler.
And stand your ground.
and Scott Newman Bill goes, are we really still doing that? And Mindy went, yes. He said, give Jack a growler, by God.
By God, give him two.
So yeah, it's great. This is a fun time. It's really fun.
And tell me about your role at Shorts. What do your days look like?
Basically, I go in, I check all the emails on my computer, I help people get the mail. I'm basically a serviceman, if you will, in the office right now. I also do some janitorial work until we find a new janitor. As I was telling someone earlier, the joke now at Shorts, or for my joke, is yeah, we have a big construction site here, and somewhere in the middle of it, you're going to find a brewery because there's construction going everywhere. So I also am the guy walking around in the line, jumping on so people can go to the bathroom, take bathroom breaks, and I'm hitting them with all the corny jokes that I knew as a child because they're new again. These guys haven't heard them yet.
Yeah. And you did when you went there. Were you brewing for? Because I think you were brewing last time I was there. Or did you take on this other role? Yeah.
I've helped just for when we have batch 1000 or whatever, throw hops in. But we have 6 full-time brewers at Shorts working 24/6 right now. And over in Bel Air we have 4 brewers also.
Gotcha.
So I don't get into brewing. Joe doesn't get into brewing that much anymore either. It's more like running stuff, getting stuff packaged up, and getting it out the door for whoever wants me to do it.
Yeah,
whether it's the quality control, sending it out to get the beer analyzed, especially the beer that has less gluten in it. You have to make sure it's a certain level, and things like that. So it's fun. Days fly by. They're going by way too quick, but it's still a lot of fun.
Where do you think, how would you describe the Michigan beer scene to somebody not from here? What do you think are its hallmarks or its characteristics?
Just this last summer, we had a bunch of people come in from Europe, and a contact person was from Elk Rapids. So we were sitting at the pole barn outside, and the guy was pulling beers over, and they were going, oh, this one's really good, this one's really good. And then they tasted this one that was like a 9 or 10%. And they go, oh, this is a nighttime beer. We can't drink this one now. So once again, I think that we're creating all these different beers that you can drink and have fun and still be very sociable, or you can drink and take a nap.
Yeah. I guess wrapping up, any words of wisdom for somebody who started a brewery in the last 2 or 3 years, or somebody that's in planning and about to open, in terms of how they can contribute or how they can be part of the community?
Yeah, our motto at Traverse Brewing Company for a long time was we're just too dumb to go away, so we're going to be here doing this. And of course you remember the bumper sticker, if you brew it, they will come.
Yeah.
That's just if you're good at what you're doing, people are going to find you. There's no doubt about it. And the more the merrier. I think it's great that we have this many breweries. I mean, before I came up here last year, I hadn't been here for a long time. And Katie's showing me around, and we're going to all the Ore Dock and places like that. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. So I think it's good for society. I think it's fun.
Yeah.
And we can create such great tastes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Thanks for being part of it, man. I love the story, and just glad you're still part of the community.
Yeah.
Always will be in my mind.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for listening and sharing while supporting Michigan breweries and craft beer everywhere. The Michigan Brewers Guild was formed in 1997, with its first summer beer festival taking place in July of 1998. Its now 5 annual festivals are dedicated exclusively to Michigan beer brewed by more than 270 member breweries. The Michigan Brewers Guild exists to promote and protect the passionate Michigan beer industry in every way possible. To learn more, visit us at mibeer.com or say hello on one of our social media pages, as we love hearing from you. From coast to coast, from far and near, let's drink Michigan beer.